Hi, hello. Going back, going back. Okay. So, hopefully you are surviving to bioenergy. Mainly those which are not chemical engineer. When Charlie was giving his lecture, I was wondering, those which are not chemical engineers, they must be worried about that. Because when I have in my class the students, we are not from chemistry origin, they are always claiming about chemical reactions and things like that. Okay. Now, following our program for today, we will have Professor Luis Cortez from Unicamp. Here in Brazil, when we present Cortez, we don't have to say anything. He's so much well known, and that we just say Cortez from Unicamp. And besides that, he's an old friend from many, many years. Don't ask me how many years, because then you realize how old we are. But for those which are not Brazilian, Cortez has been working with biofuels since the beginning of Pro-Alcohol program. He professor, now retired from Unicamp. He was vice rector of Unicamp. Unicamp is our State University of Campinas, here in São Paulo State. And he's one of the most important researchers on biofuels in Brazil. Everything you want to know about biofuels in Brazil, you ask to him. Cortez.
It's good to have friends. So, Swani. Well, thank you very much, Swani, for the invitation. Before I start, I should say that my presentation will be very different from the excellent presentation you saw from Professor Charles from Hawaii. He was more focused on technical aspects of biofuels, and I'm not so technical, so I'm going to give you more points of view. So for that, I ask you the excuses, no? Because many things that I'm going to say are just my points of view, not necessarily things that you agree. So please forgive me if you don't agree with my strong statements, okay? So anyway, let me see if I can follow the sequence of my presentation, no? So I'm going to say talk a little bit about the Brazilian energy matrix, an overview about the ethanol program in Brazil, considerations about expanding ethanol production in Brazil, challenges and commitments of Brazil in relation to environment, a perspective about perspectives of biofuels in Brazil, including biofuels for aviation and maritime use, and that will be it. So, let me use a little bit of time to explain this graphic. Well, when you see that, this graphic starts in 1970. And what you see in purple here is actually firewood. So if you look at the Brazil in the 20th century or before, you basically are going to see that Brazil is a big farm. Although we are here in São Paulo today, and the city that you probably know the most is Rio, no? But Brazil, if you go like I live 100 kilometers from here, and already my city looks like a farm. No? So when I come to São Paulo, already my feet are dirt, no? Because I come from the farm. So Brazil is actually a big farm, the biggest tropical area in the world, the biggest one. If you had to draw a map of countries considering photosynthetic potential, Brazil probably would be the Saudi Arabia of sunlight, no, of photosynthesis. Because we have the area of the United States, but it's all in between the tropics. And it rains considerably in this country. Right now we live in a dry season, but typically it rains 1.2 meters around the year. It rains a lot. We don't take too much care of water, but because Brazilians are not well, let's say, we think that the water is forever, and we don't consider. Right now we are waking up for this problem. So, but when you look at the matrix, firewood, what we used to call traditional biomass, was dominating Brazil until 1970. You may ask your question, then you see the firewood had declined in Brazil. One of the reasons was because of liquefied petroleum gas that was used in residence. When we were young, when I was young, not Swanee was not, she was not born at that time yet. No? So I remember we had many houses. We had fireplaces and you know, to cook, and I remember going to my neighbors, and all this disappeared in the Brazilian life, no? And so firewood was totally abandoned in Brazil. This one that you see today is for industrial or commercial application. But pizza places that they make, they use firewood for cooking, but in houses, practically nothing anymore. And so petroleum displaced traditional bioenergy in Brazil. And at the same time, you see a tremendous growth of sugarcane products. You can say that if you add the two portions of firewood and sugarcane, probably they were a little bit constant in the last 50 years, no? So I would say that, and what was new in Brazil was, as everywhere in the world, the growth of petroleum. But definitely, Brazil had a lot of hydro. Hydro was, we don't have that anymore to grow. Most of the electricity was produced by hydro in Brazil. Right now, this will have to be produced with some other source. The hydro is still there, but not enough to grow. Most of the hydro potential is in the Amazon, and is distant, and the Amazon is basically flat. Basically, I mean, it's not flat really, but as far as hydro potential is if you look at the Amazon River, when it enters in Brazil, 3,500 kilometers until the Atlantic Ocean, there is only a difference in level of 200 meters. So not enough, really. You have to flood the entire continent to have 200 meters height difference. No? So it's kind of complex. So this is a scenario that we have, and another interesting thing that, but this will change dramatically in the next 100 years. This will change. This will be a dramatic change. In the course of your life, this will change dramatically. You are in the middle of the storm. You probably didn't realize yet. The introduction of photovoltaics, no? The introduction of windmills, the considerations about, the kind of considerations about bioenergy that we will need all. You're going to see people criticizing this and that aspect of bioenergy. Don't worry, we will need all. We are not in the position right now to say this will not do. As far as renewables, and in a country like Brazil, we made a study recently in the last 10 years, try to see which are the countries that can copy Brazil, that can reproduce the Brazilian model. What are the countries that have potential to go with Brazil in the bioenergy direction? This is a kind of a frustrating question, frustrating answer, because like Brazil, in bioenergy, in terms of area, you may find countries, for example, like Colombia. Colombia has very high productivity and special conditions. They can harvest sugarcane there for 12 months, round the year. They don't stop like we do. We harvest for 7 months. And our productivity is much lower than the productivity in Colombia. But we have land. We don't need to irrigate. We have, just for you to have an idea, sugarcane occupies 9 million hectares in Brazil. This is 1% of Brazilian territory. 1%. And with 1% of Brazilian territory, we can make 50% of all sugar commercialized between countries in the world, besides 40% of all liquid fuel that we use for light vehicles in Brazil. If tomorrow will be a disaster, a bacteria that would eat all petroleum, Brazil would possibly be the only country that will be running 40% of its fleet could run with an alternative fuel. This was, I remember this was crazy. I entered the university, when he was saying this, I entered my university in 1976. Our generation was deeply hit by the ethanol, first by the oil shock in 1973, 73. Our generation was, I remember, I think probably Charles and Eric also was very highly influenced by, we thought that in the 70s that the world would finish, no? because of the price of oil was growing to the skies, but this was very important for us. And Brazil was living at that time in a military dictatorship, military regime. I don't know if Brazil could make an ethanol program under a democracy. I don't know. Because in a democracy, everybody speaks, no? Everybody speaks and everybody's right. So you have this and that, unions, this and that. But during the militaries, only 6 people, 7 people, 10 people at most, they were deciding everything. They were making many mistakes. It's particularly in the human rights part of the story. Other mistakes, the way they did it, the Trans-Amazonian Railroad, highway. No? So, but they did the ethanol program, they did the hydro program, they did several programs that are still there today, and that we are relatively, well, I think so, we are proud of it because we did it. When we start doing the ethanol program in Brazil, everybody laughed. The world was laughing about Brazil. And I think I went to do my master's program in Canada in 1981, and then I went to the United States for my PhD in '83 in Louisiana. And everybody was asking me questions like Brazil was a crazy country, with no sense to produce ethanol in large scale. You need to subsidize and so many criticism and so and so. But having lived that long, so not all my life yet, I hope so. But I consider that one of the most important things a developing country can do, one of the most important things is to identify which are its problems and try to solve the problem. This is more important than anything else. And Brazil was doing that. Brazil did that during the 70s, during the 80s, during the 90s. We could go on, government after government, military, civilians, corrupted people, votes, impeachment 1, impeachment 2. We were in a 50 year of a very hard political trajectory. Believe me, Brazil really experimented all problems you can imagine. But we were pursuing the goals of what was important for the country and transforming the energy matrix. And one thing that was also very important in Brazil, I think Swani will agree with me, is that the government, whoever was in Brasilia, no, they were listening to us from the university. They were not necessarily doing what we said. Yeah, but many they did. Many, for example, Professor Goldenberg occupied important positions in different governments. And he was an energy guy. And he was interested in promoting environment. And he was discussing with the academy. And this was an important aspect. I'm saying that my presentation was very different from Professor Charles, because Professor Charles focused on technology. I understand that technology is quite important, but the human aspects, the political aspects related to bioenergy, to energy, to environment, to development, this is crucial, particularly in developing countries. In Africa, for example, when we're going to discuss these issues. No? So don't fool yourself believing that technology will solve everything. You needed to understand people. You needed to put yourself, you need to negotiate with whoever is in power. Somebody that you like or somebody that you don't like, okay? But you need to negotiate if you wanted to make the best for your society, your country. You need to be able to negotiate and to understand for example, biomass. I think, for example, let me give you a number so you understand what is the importance of sugarcane in Brazil. In the state of São Paulo. The state of São Paulo has 45 million people. It's only 3% of Brazil. 3%, 24 million hectares, São Paulo state. 5 sugarcane. 5 million hectares out of 24 is sugarcane in São Paulo state. São Paulo state has 600 cities, 300 in the countryside. 1 every 2 cities in São Paulo state has a sugar mill. 1 every 2 cities has in the city 1 mill that is the biggest employer and the biggest taxpayer. This is sufficiently important for you to understand that. Another point that you need to understand, few other things that we needed to understand each other about bioenergy. Bioenergy, don't expect it to be, to have a small, a brewery. I agree with Professor Charles. If I had a brewery, I could be rich. But in a sugar mill, how many good jobs you have? How many possibilities to become rich? Only if you are really the owner of the industry. Otherwise, the salaries that are paid there, everywhere in the world, you go to Louisiana, you go to South Africa, you go to Colombia, you go to Australia, salaries in sugar mills, they have to be low or to be replaced by instrumentation. You cannot pay engineers or technicians as you pay in the industry. You need to be realistic and short, really squeeze your money, because at the end of the day, at the gas station, you need to sell your ethanol to compete with gasoline. And that needs to be low cost. And to make a low cost biofuel, doesn't matter too much the conversion for the efficiency for conversion. What really matters is your ability to produce feedstock. Because in all biofuels I know, for aviation, for cars, for trucks, the range is about 60 to 80% the weight of feedstock in the final cost. So if you are not competent in agriculture, forget about biofuels. Because your money, you depend on that. Agriculture is what is going to dictate your success in, it's not the conversion. Conversion, you can buy it. Conversion, I go to South Africa, if I have money, I go there, fish tropics, go there to Sasol, no? What is the name of the company there? You buy, you can install anywhere, but agriculture, you cannot install anywhere. Or you have it or you don't have it. Land is you have it or you don't have it. Technology you can buy. Agriculture you don't buy. And you need to be competent with that, sustainable, as Brazil has been. We are evolving, we are progressing with the law. Meantime, this last 30 years, we made, for example, to mention one law, I call it Goldenberg's law, no? The law that stopped burning sugarcane in the state of São Paulo. This was considerably important, and particularly during the dry months, no? So this was something quite important for us. I'm not considering too much the... So let me go here, if I can... okay. I tend to not use too much my slides, as you can see. No? Okay, let's talk about the phases of ethanol program. I mentioned already that we had several difficulties and so. The first thing we did when this book that I'm gonna leave it one copy to Professor Swani, and if you can read Portuguese, I can give this to you or send you the electronic address. When I was doing this book for the 40 years of the ethanol program, I came to me the question: when did Brazil become interested about ethanol? And I saw the first things in the turn of the century, 19th century to the 20th century. There was a fair in São Paulo about importing. France was developing distillation columns, and this was a novelty. No, this was something new, and Brazil was they were making a kind of a fair to show that distillation was possible. This was turn of the 19th to the 20th, beginning of the 20th century. You know, Henry Ford was one of the T model was an ethanol car, and many other things. Brazil started really more serious about this during the 20s, and during the beginning, during the 20s, we started to promote, the government started to promote cars, official cars, to use blends of ethanol and gasoline. Brazil started to have its first oil refinery in the 40s, the middle of the 40s, because we negotiate our entrance in the World War II, and Brazil was until 1939 it was on the Hitler side, no? And so when in 42, when the United States entered in the war, they convinced us to enter on their side. And we entered on their side, and this was negotiated, and we got a refinery and a steel industry as a compensation for that. And Brazil, so until the World War II, Brazil was blending ethanol in gasoline. Just for you to have an idea, until the first oil shock in 1973, the average blending of ethanol in gasoline was 7%. Just for you to have an idea. And Brazil was learning. So I remember when I was young also, Swanir may not remember that, we used to have a blue gasoline. Remember that, Swanir? Blue gasoline. Blue gasoline was really a pure gasoline. But pure gasoline in Brazil is stopped somehow, somewhere, I know, Swanir. I don't remember really when it stopped, because all our life has been with blends. So, and at the beginning, everybody was talking about, so at the beginning, really, the ethanol program, Geisel was the president in Brazil. He was former president of Petrobras, and he entered to be the president because he understood energy. And so he negotiated with entrepreneurs in Brazil. There were some important engineers also that contributed in that discussion. And they decided to convert existing sugar mills, put annexed distillation columns, and start to produce ethanol from molasses. This was the very beginning. Many countries, they do this. Well, today in Latin America, I think, if I may be mistaken, but all Latin American countries, they have mandates for blending. In most of the countries that they produce molasses, they produce sugar, they produce ethanol from molasses. Many countries, like, is there anybody from El Salvador here? No? Many countries in Central America, they make, or Guatemala, is there anybody from Guatemala? They export, they produce ethanol, they export to the United States and import gasoline. We tell them, we go there, we have a project now, a PESP project, we go there, we talk to the government, we say, listen, keep at least 10% for blending. And many people don't believe that it's possible. Still today, they don't believe that it's possible to blend ethanol and gasoline. Still today. When United States starts, I don't know when they start to blend it. They start to be more serious about ethanol in the 20 years ago, 2002. Is that right, Eric? More or less, no? And before that, no. Before that, they were skeptical about E100. So that's why they decided to make the E85, blending a little bit of gasoline to make sure that the engine will start, no problem. But Brazil we never added gasoline into the pure alcohol. We blended ethanol in gasoline, and the other fuel was E100. So we have, in gas stations in Brazil, we have only two fuels. We have E27, and this 27, you may ask me why? Why 27? Because we are going up with the blending. At the beginning, we blended 7%, 10%, 12%, 15%, 20%. And you may ask, why are we increasing the blend? Because many times, producing ethanol here was cheaper than importing gasoline, or to even importing petroleum and processing it. So right now, for example, we import a little bit of gasoline. We export crude oil. We import a little bit of gasoline, but we try to maximize blending. Today, this year, we are producing the record, but we are practically, let's say, we're producing a record volume of ethanol, but we are more or less stagnated. I'm going to mention why this stagnation happened. But the second phase of the ethanol program, you remember that we had a gap between the first oil shock and the second oil shock in 1979. And when the second oil shock hit Brazil, hit Latin America, we were spending, when the first oil shock hit Latin America, Brazil was spending 80% of all exports to import gas, to import petroleum. 80%. Can you imagine that? Was terrible for Brazil. No, let me correct. 50%, 80% was imported 20% was producing here. 50% of all exports was represented by petroleum. So Brazil had to do something. And then happened the second oil shock in 1979. Until, from the first oil shock, 73 to 79, Brazil tried to develop its own engine. There was a professor, Ernesto Stumpf, in the very good university here in ITA in Brazil, CTA in Brazil. And he was trying to, because they said, well, since we are going to go to the ethanol, why not stop paying royalties? No? And there's the military belief that we could shortcut somehow we become somehow more independent and so. But this was probably a summer's night dream, no? Not really realistic. But anyway, 79 happened the second oil shock. And the price of oil rose again abruptly. And Brazil decided, listen, now we need to go fully in ethanol. There is no more possibility. So it was not anymore a matter of blending. It was E100. It was not anymore a matter of making annex distilleries to the sugar factories. It was autonomous distilleries to produce ethanol and so on. And this was really a serious economic decision, because the economic situation of Brazil at that time was really terrible. Inflation was going up. Today, we think it's complicated. It was many times more complicated than today, I would say. And because we had a foreign debt, besides all the problems, we had a big foreign debt. Latin America was in a difficult situation, but for example, countries like Mexico, Venezuela, they were producing petroleum. Argentina was producing petroleum, but Brazil was not producing petroleum. And the price of petroleum was going up. And we were booming until 1971. Brazil was booming. 73, the economy was booming. The so-called the miracle. That's how they call it. Anyway, so the 80s was a period of ending the military regime. The military regime ended mostly because of the economic crisis. And the political instability derived, in my opinion, from the economic crisis. And so in 1984, second decade, second part of the 80s, was civil regime again. But with a society that didn't know how to discuss and problems. We had difficult problems to solve, and no more capacity to subsidize anything. Subsidies were cut. Overall, ethanol could not be subsidized. No subsidies for this, no subsidies for that, and so and so. And the industry, the ethanol industry, had to adapt. Had to adapt and had to survive in a very difficult environment. And this is when the car sales were booming. Brazil was selling 90% of cars were ethanol cars. 90% of sales, new sales, were ethanol cars. And this happened in 1989, happened what we call the ethanol crisis. The ethanol crisis was, let's say, the consumers that they were using ethanol in their vehicles, not the ones that were blended with gasoline, the ones that were used pure, E100. They thought they were fooled by the government, by Petrobras, because they invested their money in ethanol vehicles. And where was the ethanol? Where was the fuel? Brazil had to import methanol, suddenly had to import methanol and sell to supply, to cover the supply, the deficit. And so that was a serious crisis. For us, we learned a lot from that crisis, 1989. And then more political difficulties during the 90s, and so that you already know. I will not enter in details. And in 1994, 95, we had the big change in economics and in macroeconomics, and we started the stabilize the economy, stabilize the real plan, stabilize the economy. But with difficult situations, difficult problems in the energy area, not only in the liquid fuels, but also in electricity and so on. Anyway, during the 90s, the sugar industry and ethanol industry, they learned a lot from that crisis, and Brazil started to become a net exporter of sugar. Until the 80s, Brazil was really not playing an important role in the sugar market. But because of the 89 crisis, because of cutting the subsidies and so, Brazilian sugar industry, that is all private, no government money in that, they started to export a lot of sugar. And because they were producing ethanol, they were very competitive. Very competitive. They were practically destroying all the other markets internationally. And so until today, 50% of all traded sugar in the world is Brazilian. So, and you can see that if you add the two curves, the hydrate, what we call hydrous and anhydrous, if you add both, you can see that the ethanol really went up. You can see here in this map where sugar is produced, where sugar cane is produced. It basically here in São Paulo and the neighboring country, the neighboring states, and a little bit here. But what you can see here, this will bring me to another consideration. That first of all, many people talk about internationally that ethanol threatens the Amazon. I can tell you that it's exactly the opposite. Because do you believe that if tomorrow we decided to stop ethanol production here, this is going to stop deforestation in the Amazon? Do you believe that? I don't. So, but you can see that ethanol is typically based on sugarcane in Brazil, and typically in the latitude, this is 23 parallel south, and this is the equator here. So it's typically in São Paulo. It's typically so dominated. So here you see probably 50% of the fleet in the São Paulo state and the other states around. And that has a very competitive ethanol. But when you go to the other states in Brazil, particularly these states here in the north or in the south, you're going to see that the price of ethanol really pressures the price of gasoline. So you don't see the difference, too much difference anymore. So I'm going to come back to that later. This is a study that well, let me go back to that. The zoning, Professor Goldenberg also, when he was in the Secretary of Environment, right, when he promoted the zoning, the zoning for sugarcane. Today in the state of São Paulo, state of São Paulo is 3% of Brazil. 24 is a million hectares, the total. 5 is sugarcane. 9 is pasture land. Even in the state of São Paulo, pasture land is twice as much as sugarcane, and expanding. This is an interesting part. Once I went to visit Carnegie Mellon University. It's a famous university in the United States, and I had the pleasure to meet a professor there. I don't know if Eric Larson knows this professor. He is Professor Lester Lave. He used to be an advisor for energy in the Clinton administration, I think. And I was excited about the idea to make cooperation with Carnegie Mellon. And I went to, he conceded me 5 minutes to talk. Okay. And he said, well, I'm just going to ask you one question. He said that to me. How much ethanol can Brazil make? I already know that you can make it, so and so and so and so. How much ethanol can you make it? In 5 minutes, huh? So I didn't have an answer for that question. So I came back to Brazil, asking myself, and this was back in 2002 or something like this. And I came back with that question. I said, I'm going to try to answer that question. And we decided to put together a project, to see how much ethanol could Brazil produce if we really wanted to make large volume. We asked ourselves the question: Can we make ethanol enough? This is an academic question. Doesn't mean that we're planning to do. Okay? How much ethanol can we make? Can we replace 10% of all gasoline used worldwide? Can we make it in Brazil? 10% of all gasoline. How much is that? How much is that? So we asked that question. How much, that time that we put together this project, 2005, the volume of gasoline consumed in the world was 1.2 trillion liters. 1.2 trillion. If you correct it by the heating value, you're going to arrive in 1.5, 1.6 billion liters of ethanol. So it means that if we make something near 200 billion liters in Brazil, we could, by the year 2025, to substitute 10% of all gasoline consumed worldwide. Does it make sense? Probably not, because you need to ship this, you need to negotiate. Countries are, protect each other, protect their barriers, their business, and it's very difficult to break this kind of, particularly Brazil. Brazilians are not very good salesmen. Even saleswomen also, they are not very good to sell their products. Well, coffee, for example, we don't sell very well. In many other products, we don't sell very well. But anyway, the question was there. The question was there, and when we made this question, Embrapa said, "Listen, you are crazy." We mapped Brazil, and we said we have 300 million hectares available, and potentially could be used for sugarcane production in Brazil. 300 million hectares. Do you know how much is the land for agriculture in the world? It's 1.5 billion hectares. So 1/5 of all available land for agriculture, we could plant sugarcane in Brazil alone, without touching the Amazon. Amazon is 450. So this means that putting aside the Atlantic forest, the Pantanal area, some other regions in the very dry in Brazil, we could, 300 million hectares we could put in sugarcane. And Embrapa, the Brazilian government, said, "You're crazy. You are not going to do not even a portion of that." And they mapped it. And they put many agronomists, and they said, "Listen, what you can do is 60. But 60, it's a lot. Do you know how much land is necessary for Brazil alone to substitute 10% of gasoline worldwide? 25. So imagine, 60. Embrapa agrees with 60. We have it today, 9 with sugar and ethanol. With additional 25, we could, if we wanted. We will not do it. But we could replace 10% of gasoline worldwide. This is fantastic. With first generation, we're not talking about the second floor. No second floor, first floor. Okay? Second floor are for those countries that need second floor. We don't need second floor. We can make it on the ground. Varieties of sugarcane, existing varieties of sugarcane. 80 tons per hectare. Not much. Not much. And so, like we say here in Brazil, rice and beans, not a really fantastic technology. Rice and beans, only rice and beans. Okay? So we mapped Brazil. You see, for example, the most important problem in relation to biofuels, when you talk about agriculture, the most important problem is related to water, is related to precipitation. Because land, just for you to have an idea, we have 1.2 billion hectares in agriculture in the world, twice the area of Brazil. Brazil is 850, or if you add United States and Brazil, you get the agricultural land worldwide, okay? But pasture land, you have 3.5 billion hectares. You have almost 2.5 as much land on pasture land. So Lilind is trying to intensify pasture to see if it's possible to use pasture land for biofuels. It's a strategy worldwide. Also in Brazil, because you're going to see that in the land use in Brazil, let's say Amazon is 50% of Brazil. Let's not touch the Amazon. But the remaining 50% of Brazil, half of that, 200 million hectares in Brazil, is pasture land. 1 cow per hectare. The cows are, like there was one professor here in Brazil that says the cows are very lonely, no? Because, you know, they one hectare from each other. And so this is really sad. So we need, if we shorten 3% the distance between the cows, we make it 25 million hectares. Do we need that? That's another question. Maybe it's better to use that for food if somebody pays for it. The question about biofuels, I'm an agricultural engineer, so I'm going to make a statement here looking from the land point of view, okay, from the market point of view. The question about, for example, if you start producing strawberry, you make a, let's say you assume that the consumption of strawberry in São Paulo is 5,000 tons per day. I'm guessing, okay? Let's say that you say, I'm going to make a big plantation of strawberry and flood São Paulo with strawberry. Do you think everybody's going to pay the same price? You're crazy. As soon as the people will understand that strawberry are available in giant amounts, they are going to not, the price is going to drop. What is the beauty about bioenergy? The beauty about bioenergy is that it's elastic. Doesn't matter how much you make. The price will be the same. Because a car eats more than 50 people, 100 people. So that's the beauty about for business. So coffee is not the same. If you put coffee in Brazil, Brazil is already the largest producer. If we double the production, price goes down. Soybean goes down. Corn. So food in general is not elastic. Milk is not elastic. You can make cheese, but you cannot make a cheese for China. How many Chinas can you make to drink all the coffee, milk, meat that Brazil can make it? So if we are a country of agriculture, we need to invent something that requires land. And for us, what requires land is sugarcane, eucalyptus. Beef is not really a good idea because beef, if you calculate the life cycle analysis, if you make a life cycle analysis for beef, the world didn't realize that yet, but it's very poor. We need to do something about that. We cannot afford to have 1 hectare, 1 cow on it. It's too much land. We need to put something better that protects the land, protects the environment, better than the beef, better than the cow. Maybe biofuel is a transient solution, but is the solution that we have. Is one of the good solutions that we have. But so we mapped Brazil and with a good people we did this kind of maps. We involved Petrobras. We asked Petrobras how much will cost to transport from inland to harbors and ship it to other countries. And so we did this kind of studies, and it was very exciting to do this. We did this, we invented a kind of standard distilleries that were clusters, because until now the mills were isolated. We invented a cluster of mills, 15 mills altogether, that you make a pipeline to the harbor. You know? So it was very exciting to do this. Part of this is already was constructed. Part of this was constructed, of course, not because of our own. But now the challenges. I don't know what time is it. 5? Okay, so I have some time. So this is how much land we, just for you to have an idea of land use. No? So this is just for you to have an idea of land use. Okay, so the ethanol in Brazil is constructed, let's say, in 3 levels of flexibility. When you see the word flex, you may refer to the car. But actually, the flexibility that we see in the ethanol program in Brazil is not only in the car. First of all, there is a flexibility in the field, because the varieties, you can make it more sugar, more sucrose, more fiber, and so and so. There is this kind of right now there is even it's appearing in the market, the energy cane. You know? So energy cane that is supposed to have much more fiber than the ordinary cane. You know? So this will if we know what to do with the fiber. The problem is that we know more what to do with the sucrose than with the fiber. The fiber, right now, developed technology, really we have the Rankine cycle that we can burn it and make electricity. Second generation ethanol it's coming, but it's more on the neighborhood of a promise, no? Than really reality so far. And the second level is related to the process. All mills in Brazil, all mills, they can produce more or less sugar or ethanol. They are not stuck with one percentage. If price of sugar is good, they can make more sugar. If the price of ethanol is good, they can make more ethanol. You may ask me, how much is this flexibility? It's in the neighborhood of 40, 60%, so more or less like that. Also, for example, all mills, they have distillation columns for anhydrous and hydrous ethanol. I question this very much. I think that we should be going towards the elimination of hydrous ethanol. We should, because this is one thing that only Brazil does. Brazil is the only country really that produces large amounts of hydrous ethanol. All other countries, they produce anhydrous ethanol, even in the United States, right, Eric? And this may give the impression that because it costs less to produce hydrous ethanol, costs less. But at the end of the day, when you look at the whole system, no, that is involved in the transportation and logistics and everything, the commercialization and all the aspects that are involved, probably it's about time that Brazil should review this issue and commercialize pure, only anhydrous ethanol. I think we need to make a good calculation about that, but I think it's about, this doesn't mean to give up the ethanol car. You can still maintain the ethanol car running anhydrous. But you see what happens today in Brazil. People from other countries, no, they come here and they look at the gas station that we have. You may be very confused about what goes on with alcohol in Brazil. You may be very confused because, for example, what the hell is the percentage of ethanol do you use? If the person can arrive at any gas station and fill up the tank with any fuel, is it really necessary to have a blend? That's a question, no? If your cars accept anything, why do you need to be stuck with 27% gasoline, ethanol, and 73 gasoline? Why is not really just gasoline and ethanol and you can do anything you want? Because of history. We became frustrated in the 1989 crisis, and then in the year 2000, we decided to import the solution. Part of the solution was the developed in Brazil, the flex, the lambda, what do you call that? The sonda lambda, how do you say this? The sensor that recognizes the air-fuel ratio that's developed by companies like Bosch and another Italian company, and this was made locally. But well, then the flex fuel car, it was a good solution from the marketing point of view. Was a good solution because then the sales jumped from 1 million, 1.5 million to almost 4 million cars per year. It was very good from the commercial point of view. But from the consumer point of view, there are some questions if we did the right thing. But it was marketing-wise, it was the right thing to do. But right now, for example, right now, I'm going to start to talk about one thing that you should be seeing in the coming years: the electric vehicles. Electric vehicles is something that is emerging now. No? You hear about electric vehicles. You may even, if you are interested on biofuels, you may be even asking yourself, what is the future of biofuels if the electric cars are coming? That's a question. That's a good question, actually. But believe me that electric vehicles are more likely to start. They are starting already in developed countries, that they can pay high prices for their cars. Here in countries like Brazil, we cannot pay high prices for the cars. The average car here will cost in the neighborhood of $7,000, $10,000 at most. I mean, and cars manufactured by companies like Tesla, companies that are sell expensive cars, relatively, maybe not expensive for countries in North America or in Europe, but for us are very expensive. So if you ask it, the different groups of stakeholders, when the electric vehicles are going to start in Brazil? Production, commercialization, so far is a curiosity. You may find here and there somebody that has a hybrid car. It's still a curiosity. In Campinas, my city, we have 3-4 stations to recharge stations. But I never saw anybody recharging anything. It's just more for birds to be there. No? But it's coming. It will come. It will come during your lifetime. You're going to see a dominating. If you look at the numbers in the International Energy Agency, if you look at those numbers of International Energy Agency, you're going to see that the years between 2030 and 2060, this transition are going to intensify, but more likely in markets like China, Europe. I believe that United States will come a little bit later than Europe and China. I believe because of all the You know, when you have an infrastructure, to change your infrastructure is not simple. Even if you are rich, it's not simple to change your infrastructure. For countries like Brazil, to change from what we have, the ethanol, to go to electric car, you need to ask the question, why? Why? Why are we changing from ethanol to electric vehicles? Why? Is CO2 the discussion? If we look at the papers that were published so far, if you compare life cycle analysis of electric options and sustainable biofuels, not any biofuel, sustainable biofuels. If you compare life cycle analysis, you're going to see that we are in the same neighborhood. So why are we changing? Why are we going to change from something that already gives us the same CO2 emissions? I mean, why? But we are going to pay a big price for this because we don't have in Brazil an automobile industry. All cars that we have in Brazil are manufactured locally, but by companies that are from other countries. I'm not against that. I'm in favor. Welcome. Ford, Chrysler, Fiat, Volkswagen. Welcome. But because we don't have any company, Brazilian company, do you know what is going to happen in the long run? Is that we are not going to have solutions developed here to compete with electric vehicles. We are not going to have. We are in the process right now. I'm discussing right now with some other people to put together a roadmap to compare the options of electric cars and the ethanol solutions. Believe me, we have 5 or 6 possibilities with ethanol. Also, the bioelectricity. Don't forget that two-thirds of sugarcane is fiber. And that fiber goes to produce bioelectricity. So, question, would not that be a good way to use the bioelectricity to run cars, electric cars? This would not be something interesting, and it would be an extension of what we do already with the ethanol. So a roadmap involving ethanol solution, it's a must. We need to do this. Your generation needs to get involved, unless you want to become really a follower, no? Just a follower, just to follow what everybody else decides. No? So, but anyway, the third possibility for flexibility that we have is given by the consumer and the regulation. The regulation is the government agency that exists in any country. And the government regulation will state if how much is the mandate, how much is the percentage, the blend, how much, well, if so it gives a certain possibility in terms of not only the engine. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. And one thing that we need to recognize is that the sugar is the main. If the person plants a sugar cane, the idea is to produce sugar. They need to produce sugar to pay for the whole thing. It's like, for example, in the United States, every biofuel needs, how can I say this? Bengala, Sony, walking stick, exactly, walking stick. Every biofuel needs a walking stick. The walking stick so far for ethanol was sugar. In the case of the United States, for example, they have you know, corn. When you produce corn, it's not only starch. Starch is what you use to produce ethanol. But you have a protein, you have fibers and protein, and that protein, that fiber, is used to feed cows. But so you may ask yourself, why did the production of ethanol in Brazil stagnated in the neighborhood of 25, 26, 27 billions of liters of ethanol? Why did it stabilize, stagnate at that time, at this level? Because we cannot sell more sugar. The sugar that we produce is already, right, this year, particularly this year, is the first year that we will produce less than 30 million tons. And some of the European countries, they are very happy because they can produce more sugar there. No? But we would like very much to see other countries using the Brazilian model to produce sugar and to produce ethanol, develop their markets, and would be good, particularly for developing countries. If you're already rich, you don't need that. But if you need jobs, you need agricultural activity in the rural areas, you need this kind. You don't want to have more people inflating your big cities like São Paulo, for example. If you needed to have more rural development, the idea of producing biofuel, it's a good one. Then you can produce your own sugar. You can even export if you want a little bit of sugar, but you can produce your own bioelectricity. That's the so-called Brazilian model. But we cannot go beyond that. Our model has reached a certain saturation. We cannot see another decade and we doubling the production. We don't produce to export. Our ethanol is for us. We don't produce to export. Actually, when we need a little bit, we import from the United States. We don't really export ethanol. We needed to invent another model if we wanted to expand our production. And what would be this model, this new model that we can use? What are first? Imagine for me to come to these conclusions, right or wrong, right or wrong. I walk a lot, I think a lot about the problem. It's not really something that just came to my mind. I believe that in a country big as Brazil, 200 million hectares, 200 million heads of beef, what we need to do is, if we wanted to improve the environment, if we wanted to create wealth in the rural environment, we need to shrink, to intensify beef production. So far, the Brazilian cows are eating only grass. They cannot, we need to shrink, we need to bring them. But sugarcane, if you look at the experiments in the state of São Paulo, there is one sugar mill, Suani probably knows, Vale do Rosário, in Ribeirão Preto. It's a town 200 kilometers from here, 250 kilometers more or less, Ribeirão Preto. And there they have 22,000 cows eating hydrolyzed bagasse. It's nice, hydrolyzed bagasse, but bagasse is not really an ideal feed. It's good to hydrolyze to make it more digestible, but you need to really put something more protein. You need to put protein. And looking at the solutions, looking at, for example, the United States, I will confess that I always look at the way the Americans produce ethanol with a certain prejudice. Forgive me, Eric, forgive me. But it was my fault, my fault. I always look at it with a certain prejudice. But today, I believe that they did what was good for them, and maybe a little bit of what they do there may be good for Brazil. Because Brazil has a lot of cows. We produce in the neighborhood of 10 million tons of beef a year, of meat a year. We export half of that. We produce as much as the United States in terms of beef. But we needed to have a better life cycle analysis. And to intensify, to take the cows from the field. And it's better to have a crop like corn that you can make ethanol in regions where the ethanol is expensive in Brazil, that because of logistics and so on, you can, and exactly in the same regions that we have cows. The beef is there. So we needed to put strategy. There are already, do you know that? As many people, they don't know this thing. I was making an inventarium in the last 2 months. I discovered 10 projects already going on with producing ethanol from corn in Mato Grosso, Brazil. I called the company, one of the companies, I will not tell you the name. I called the company and I said, listen, I am Luis Cortez from the University of Campinas, and so I'm interested about ethanol. I would like to see if we can make a cooperation. No, but I'm just curious about what you're doing, and maybe we can do something together. No. I said, well, maybe there is something there, no? That I should be looking at more careful. No? So I'm talking with some other people. Let's put together a project to understand the situation. I'm convinced that it is a potentially good idea for us. I was looking for a model, a new model. And maybe I should be looking more carefully what the United States is doing. Because maybe we did it the first stage. Looking at the second generation biofuels, well, I think that is a little bit complicated. I'm not saying that this is unfeasible. But believe me, for a country like Brazil, maybe it's a better idea. Let's make research on second generation biofuels, no problem. Let's continue making research. But in terms of right now, business right now, maybe it's a good idea to look at the United States, to see if tomorrow morning we can install 20, 30, 40 mills here with corn ethanol to intensify beef production. Because this is proven technology. We are exporting, we are producing right now in Brazil 100 million tons of corn. Do you know how we plant corn in Brazil? Most of corn in Brazil. Do you know how we do that? It's not like everybody in the world. We have 2 or sometimes 3 crops in the same year. This is so-called, in Brazil, it's called the small harvest, safrinha. So we plow, we plant soybean. When we harvest soybean, we come and plant corn without fertilizer. We take out we harvest soybean, we plant corn without fertilizer. We get 6 tons per hectare. It's not much. In the United States, the average is about 10. But that's the only crop they have. We are the second one, and we don't fertilize. It's like a bonus. Huh? Like a bonus. So it's not a bad idea. You may ask how much corn the United States put into ethanol production? Do you know how much? Do you know how much corn is produced in the United States? In the neighborhood of 350, 400 million tons. It's the main crop. Brazil produced this year 100 million tons of corn. That coincides, it's the same number that the United States puts into corn production. So this means that if Brazil tomorrow, instead of exporting corn, we convert into ethanol and beef, maybe it starts to be a good idea. I don't know. It's for us to decide. This is what is important. We need to decide. We need to decide what we are going to do with the land in the world. It's not just criticize. We need to decide what we are going to do with people. We need to give right conditions for the people everywhere. So we need to sit and discuss like United Nations. You are like United Nations. We need to sit and decide to make good decisions for the world. No? That's what is all about. So should we copy the American model? Should we, what should we do? So the advantage, at the economic point of view, I would say that integration with sugarcane may be a good solution also, because sugarcane has one feature. Sugarcane is very rich in fiber. Corn is very poor in fiber. If you integrate both, you may have your industry running. I know it's not that simple. Don't tell me that. I know that it's not very simple. But we may think about a solution to make a flax mill operating with sugar and corn. I know it's not simple. I know. I come here to share the idea with you. Okay? So, market. We could nationalize, because many of the regions in Brazil that produce corn are not producing sugarcane, and vice versa. So, maybe it's a good idea also, because if we here in Brazil, if you look at the prices, the ethanol price, you see like a electrocardiogram. No? It's always during right now is season. So right now price of ethanol is low. When it comes in February, March, particularly these 2 months, just before the new harvest, prices go up. People complain, and people complain to the government. The government is, well, the government is like a potato bag. It receives all the criticism. If you have to blame somebody, blame the government. And the land use. Maybe it's a good idea to intensify the pasture, to take, let's say, half of the cows from the pasture and promote regional development. I was going to say something about this, but the Brazilian commitment with Paris Agreement is very simple to make, very simple to achieve. We are not going to have any difficulties with that. So mainly this is the CO2 emissions in Brazil. Maybe somebody has already shown this to you. No? They didn't show this to you yet? Okay, this is the CO2 emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions in Brazil. And the above part there is land use change. So meaning the forest, the deforestation, and all this, the problems involved. But you see that in the last, if you use the 2005 as a reference year, it's going to be very simple for Brazil to achieve 37% reduction on 2005. Because energy is growing, the other things are growing, but really if we just cut the deforestation thing, it's already easy to and Brazil should have a zero. Brazil should have zero deforestation, no doubt about that. Trends, electric mobility. I was talking to you about that. You can see here in this graph, in the blue is gasoline. And the years here, just for you to have an idea, this is 2060, this is 2020. So the gasoline cars and diesel is also coming down. So we're going to see a family of electric vehicles going up. No doubt about that. This is a table. You're going to stay with this table if you want, but the Professor Lewis Fulton came here and presented this table to us, showing what are the possibilities for biofuels, fossil fuels and biofuels, the market in 2010, 2050, for considering light vehicles, trucks, maritime use, aviation use. So this means that we're going to have a market. Because we don't have a solution really for maritime, as Professor Charles showed you, the aviation. The aviation doesn't have a solution for, not simple to make a 747 electric. Huh? Not simple. Imagine the battery, you know? To do, not be a simple task to do. I can't really see this very well. The reading thing is, but if you're gonna get the presentation, so it'll be easier to. I see it as a good alternative. In the years, few years before, Boeing and Embraer, that is going to be in 1 year. It's already Boeing, you know. So they asked us to do a roadmap for biofuels for aviation, and we did this document for them. But to tell you that if you, I'm going to leave this with Professor Swani. If you want, I can bring on Wednesday the link, no, for these publications, and I can give this to you. And the people think that there is a miracle solution in biofuels. For example, they think about, it's like a religion, huh? Like for example, the ones that are in favor, the ones that are against. The ones that are against, you don't even know why they are against, no? Because they are against so many things that it's the ones that are in favor. Sometimes they protect so much biofuels that even they believe that you can feed a city like São Paulo with biodiesel used from fries, French fries. Can you imagine? How can you feed São Paulo, trucks in São Paulo, buses in São Paulo with reused French fried oil? It's not possible. I mean, you'll be needing an army to do that. No, it's not possible. So, but so you may ask, how much biofuel is necessary for the aviation industry worldwide? Incredibly enough, is in the neighborhood of 200 billion, 250 billion liters. The same number that we used there in the past. Remember when we did the 10% of the world demand for the same number? It's 2,000. So it's not really an incredible amount. It's in Brazil and few other countries, biofuels for aviation and maritime use will have to be produced in different countries, in different areas, because you cannot have only one place of supply. You need to have involvement of African countries, involvement of as much as possible Australia, as much as possible as Russia, as much as possible United States, Canada. You see, these countries that are cold, even with the global warming, will not be warm enough for crops, for energy crops. But maritime and aviation is really a good opportunity we identify, like Professor Charles, several pathways. But I can tell you one thing about these pathways. Maybe I'll try to simplify. Okay, let's say the ideal molecule. If you're looking for an ideal molecule to substitute biojet, and what crop does this gives to you? You would be looking for vegetable oils. Vegetable oils are the feedstocks that are closer to what you can substitute, like Professor Charles used the word surrogate biojet. No, but you know that oil crops, they don't give big yields. You may ask yourself, what is the sugar cane of vegetable oils? The sugar cane of vegetable oils is palm oil. Palm oil may give you Palm trees may give you 5,000 liters per hectare per year. Sugarcane gives you 7, first generation. Corn gives you 3.54 thousand liters per hectare. So, but typically, soybean gives to you 600 kilograms per hectare. It's not much. And so, but then you have to look for, specific possibilities like canola or specific, the ones that can go into a second crop, that you can split, you can divide the emissions, so that you can satisfy the emission thing. So these other solutions that people are dreaming about, you converting solid waste and flue gases, those are nice, but not really in a short run. Anyway, I think that Brazil should use the existing expertise about ethanol in cooperation with countries like European countries, United States, and some other countries that are interested in this, to develop as much as possible. You need to have an adequate crop. You cannot really produce biofuel without an adequate crop, an adequate system, production, an adequate agriculture. Agriculture is crucial. Most of you are probably studying, those that are involved in biofuels, are probably studying conversion. Conversion is not really crucial. Well, for second generation it is. For second generation it is, but for first generation really is not crucial. The crucial thing is agriculture. Agriculture is really terribly important for biofuels. And believe that the amount of money you're going to make, for example, sugarcane, interior of São Paulo, 7,000 liters per hectare. People come to me and say, can a family live with? I say, no way. Would you like to live with 7,000 liters of alcohol? Professor Swani said 20 cents of a dollar per liter. I would say that probably if you go to 50 cents of a dollar, cost, not profit. Let's say that you go 40 cents, a compromise between me and Professor Swani, 40 cents of a dollar per liter, 10%, 10 cents profit. You're talking about $700 per year, income per hectare. This is nothing. For a family, this is nothing. For a rich guy, that's a good enough, because then you multiply by 30,000 hectares, you make money. But really for a family, that's nothing. You need to plant strawberry, you need to plant coffee. You can't plant biofuels. Biofuels are for rich people, for countries that have a lot of land, a lot of possibilities and so on. Those are not for many countries in the world. When I mean rich country, I don't mean necessarily countries with $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 per capita. No. A rich country in terms of land. Mozambique, for example, is a rich country of land. It's a good idea for Mozambique. But not necessarily for all countries. No? So solution is each transportation mode requires a different solution and so on. So let me go to the conclusion now. You are probably tired of me already. So Brazil has enough land. When we fly here from São Paulo to Manaus, you're going to only see adequate land for agriculture. No? But we needed to invent another model that will be possible to expand. And maybe aviation, maritime, and bioelectricity is also very good for that. I would say that it's inevitable. The markets are changing very fast. we are going towards a more electrical world, more electrical energy matters. Photovoltaics is going to take time, at least here in Brazil, to achieve one Itaipu. It's going to take time. Wind has already achieved that, no? So by installed capacity. And anyway, now if you want, we can discuss a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the very provocative speech. I was interested in your idea about corn ethanol.
Yeah.
So corn makes a lot of fiber in addition to the grain. Yes. Maybe not as much as sugarcane, but do you think it could be a similar model of the grain going to ethanol, but the fuel for the processing provided by the fiber from the corn production?
I believe that from what I know, Eric, I would invite you to do the following, not necessarily with me, okay? But I would be very glad to make this interface. I think we needed to put a group of students, Brazilians and Americans. Anybody else who wants to participate in this joint effort would be nice. Trying to study the benefits of adopting, for Brazil to adopt the American model. The American model of producing ethanol. The United States produces ethanol from corn in two different ways that are not too different, let's put it this way. No? But the main characteristics that I see is this integration with using the dry distiller's grain into composing a good portion of the beef feed. And I think creating feedlots, Brazil right now, just for you to have an idea, Eric, maybe 5% only of the Brazilian beef production is in feedlots. Only 5%. So we needed to make changes also in the animal breed.